Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked and to the many thousands of you listening to the pod, and also on TikTok, YouTube now, and all the social platforms. Coming up later on, some of those who've been sending us some replies on Sport Unlocked on YouTube, listening and watching Tariq Panja from the New York Times, Martyn Ziegler from the Times, myself, Rob Harris from Sky News.
Well, it's great that we're having all these people, extra people, coming to listen to us, guys. And we've got lots to talk about this week. Very interesting Champions League week, I think.
5 English teams automatically through. A huge dominance for them.
And the Chinese premier, Xi Jinping, how many of those teams does he support?
Listen to the pod to find out. And what's going on in Saudi Arabia? They've delayed their hosting of the Winter Asia Games. Also, problems for Live Golf with another departure.
Another bumper edition of Sport Unlocked.
It's not the usual place to start this week. Beijing, where British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been visiting the Chinese President Xi Jinping, and there's been a bit of football diplomacy there. Starmer presented Xi with the match ball from Sunday when Manchester United, apparently one of Xi's teams, beat Arsenal.
Well, it's the whole Chinese approach to football is very interesting, because 10 years ago they were seen as being the country that was going to buy all the big clubs, investing hugely, hold the World Cup. That's all sort of collapsed. I mean, I think everybody thought 2030, 2034, China's going to be hosting the Men's World Cup. They, bought a load of Premier League teams. Most of those have sort of fizzled out, and I think not just Premier League, also big European teams in other countries too. So what's been going on?
What's been going on? Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, was gobsmacked that Xi Jinping is a football fan. That surprised me. Whoever's doing his prep should have known some of this stuff, because Mr. Xi is not a fan of one Premier League team, not even two, not even three, 4 Premier League teams, including Crystal Palace, as well as both Manchester United and Manchester City and Arsenal. Now, Crystal Palace, you might be wondering why. I remember a decent player from China wearing the stripy shirt at Crystal Palace. I'm pretty sure you guys don't. Go on.
Was it Sun Ji-hai?
Man City. It was Fan Zihe. 88 games for Crystal Palace between 1998 and 2001. And, I'm not saying that's the only reason why Mr. Xi supports Crystal Palace. He apparently took a liking to, was it Dave Bassett? Roy Hodgson? Some of the coaching stars of Crystal Palace as well. Be nice to get him on the pod one day.
Well, to ask his views on the Cas case, should they have been in the Europa League?
Indeed. Well, he came, didn't he, to the UK, Mr. Xi, in 2015. David Cameron took him for a tour of Manchester City. Probably fortunate that he didn't go to West Ham instead of Aston Villa, giving Cameron's renowned mistake of those two clubs. But anyway, and after that, actually, China or Chinese company bought 13% of Manchester City. Big amount of money at the time. And I think that stake, they still hold that stake in Manchester City. One of the few sort of Chinese investments in football that are still going.
But despite so much football talk on the trip, unlike some other prime ministerial delegations, including to India in the past, there was no one from the Premier League on it. Although there were a couple of sports officials amongst all the business leaders. There was the CEO of Table Tennis England, Sally Lockyer, and Jason Ferguson from the World Professional Billiard and Snooker Association.
Both those are very big Chinese connections, so that's not a surprise. I think the fact there was no Premier League represented probably indicates just what we've been talking about, that sort of basically China's not interested.
If you think about the Premier League situation with China, there was the Mesut Ozil case not so long ago, well, a few years ago now, where our former Arsenal midfielder, German international World Cup winner, openly criticised China over its treatment of the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang.
And Arsenal distanced themselves from Ozil. They said, as a football club, Arsenal has always adhered to the principle of not involving itself in politics, really, even though Ozil was standing up for human rights and the persecution of the Uyghur minority.
Yeah, that was all happening at a very, very tense time, because around the same time, separate case with Hong Kong, the NBA, if you remember, had years of problems with its business operations in China after Daryl Morey, general manager of the Houston Rockets, made a criticism of the Chinese government's treatment of the citizens of Hong Kong.
Well, maybe there's a reason no football officials were on the trip is because they might want to distance themselves from Chinese football, because there has been a growing corruption scandal in recent years. And just on the same day Starmer and Xi were talking football, a big Chinese corruption and match fixing case in football reached a conclusion with 73 people banned for life. This is on top of 43 officials and players who were banned in 2024. And amongst those who've been banned, former Premier League player Li Tai played for Everton in the Premier League before going on to coach the national team. Also a former president of the Chinese Football Association. Li Tai was convicted and jailed already for taking and offering millions of dollars of bribes.
Everton, not one of Mr. Xi's favoured Premier League teams. I wonder if Li Tai hadn't been convicted, whether we could have added them to the list. But the entire Chinese Football League really has collapsed since, we were talking about those growth years, because we've had a huge number of teams going bankrupt, including those owned by some of China's richest men. The league, it really is in tatters there as well, beyond the corruption probe.
And when the new Chinese Super League season begins, 9 of the 16 teams will begin with points deductions. And a team from Shanghai and from Tianjin will begin on minus 10 points. They're the heaviest penalties.
The Shanghai team famously had Nicholas Anelka as a striker in the heydays when they could pay those big wages. But if you're a Chinese football fan, I don't know how you could follow this competition in any way. It just seems waste of everyone's time at this point.
So complete turmoil in Chinese football. The power has shifted in the Asian Football Confederation to Saudi Arabia. But how are things shaping up in Saudi sport? We know they've got the World Cup in 2034, Olympic aspirations maybe too, but we've mentioned it often. Saudi Arabia had been building up to hosting the Winter Asia Games in 2029, but then suddenly an announcement in recent days saying it's been indefinitely postponed.
Yeah, I thought it was a funny thing to say, indefinitely postponed, because that, why not just say it's been cancelled? But no, that's too much of a blow to the pride. I mean, it's mad. I think people say that there is snow in the high altitude at Saudi Arabia, but I've also spoken to people who know quite a lot about the country who say it was a mad idea to suggest you could have the amount of snow that you need for the winter sports they're talking about. And if they thought this was going to be constructed artificially, it's a bit like the NEOM virtual city. I think it's the original plan for that has been indefinitely postponed as well.
Well, this is due to be a ski resort in and around NEOM, the futuristic $500 billion city.
Yeah, I mean, all told, all of these things put together, compared to the razzmatazz and the numbers, the mind-blowing numbers and those ideas, futuristic ideas, it's all feeling a little bit flat now. The oil prices, of course, are a lot lower. That's affecting the Saudi treasury. And oil is still a big part of the economy. They're trying to pivot away from it and making sure there's, a more balanced economy. But again, this shows that process is going to take a long time coming. A lot of these things are delayed. And this other projects as well, reading that the cube, massive golden cube in Riyadh that was supposed to be developed, one of the world's biggest entertainment centers, that also might be scrapped now as well. Yeah, it's one thing after another.
Yeah, there's a sense in Saudi Arabia they're trying to bring in more investment. Perhaps there isn't the wealth there that they thought there was to fund all these big projects, all these vanity sports events that they've been staging there.
Well, I think there's a sort of rationalisation for sure. I mean, although the Saudis are prepared to spend a lot of money to get what they want, I think when it comes to actually spending a lot of money to put on something which is unnecessary from their point of view, such as the Winter Games, then I think that then realization dawns that this probably isn't the best idea in the world.
Some question what this means for Newcastle United. Have they really got the commitment to invest money there? There's the stadium that hasn't been built yet. Is it quite handy for them? They can talk about the Premier League's financial restrictions as impeding perhaps the levels of investment that fans would want.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a priority, and you can imagine, and you can see that as well, where domestic sport seems to be everything really for Saudi Arabia. You've got the World Cup, the Saudi Football League, where even there as well, you see some of purse strings being tightened, some of the transfer fees and salaries that were being paid a few years ago. We're not seeing things like that as well. Newcastle feels like a very distant outpost of the Saudi sports project at the moment.
And what about Live Golf? There's meant to be a potential merger with the PGA Tour. Launched a great fanfare in 2022. So much cash, luring some of the biggest names in golf. But we are starting to see some of those former major champions start to desert the Rebel Tour.
Yeah, with Brooks Koepka a couple of weeks ago. Now Patrick Reed. I think he's gone back to the PGA. I think what this shows is that it's kind of a bit of a warning for sport generally. Is that you can pay a lot of money, a huge amount of money. You can try and outbid everybody. You can get a lot of the best players, but that just doesn't guarantee success because it's very hard to replicate what the existing competitions and tournaments have. And if you don't have that, it can be really difficult. And that's what they've come up against, really. People are not talking about, oh, did you hear who won Live Golf tournament last week? They just don't, people just aren't interested.
And when it's money that entices you to the tour, rather than this sort of bond of affection to the event like Live Golf, then it's easier to break that bond. And we heard it from Patrick Reed, who said when leaving Live this week, I'm a traditionalist at heart and I was born to play on the PGA Tour, which is where my story began with my wife, Justine. There just isn't that affection for Live, really.
He didn't say that when he joined Live Golf, did he? By the way, the numbers on this are staggering, aren't they? Live Golf has committed roughly anything between $3.5 and $5 billion to this venture. If we're saying it's flopped, that is a real cash drain, and it just shows, these projects and their kind of, they were like a bullet out of a gun in their expenditure all those years ago. 1.26 billion plus spent on player contracts, and you got these guys saying, right, thanks for the money, I'm now going back to play golf. I'm being watched on telly. It's almost feels like a heist.
Yeah, something that has more sporting feeling, playing at the events that has the history and the heritage, rather than something that's just been created in a new format that didn't exist until 4 years ago. And there will be questions, what does this mean overall for Saudi's ambitions, particularly as it does potentially pursue the 2036 Olympics? Well, something that might have shifted things back in Qatar's favour, because Qatar is looking to stage those Olympics in 2036. A new president of the Olympic Council of Asia has been elected, the brother of the Emir.
Yeah, this is quite an important organisation, the Olympic Council of Asia, very influential in that, in the whole continent, really. Perhaps in a way more important, more influential than the Asian Football Confederation. It has greater clout, and I think having a Qatari as the leader of that is good news for that particular Gulf kingdom.
Sheikh Johan bin Hamad Al Thani, one of the brothers of the Emir. That's an event quite a bit down the line, the 2036 Olympics. This is a World Cup year in Canada, Mexico, and it's the United States we talk about so often. Now questions about the suitability growing as hosts, really, the United States. This is following a second American being killed by agents in Minnesota. Alex Pretty dying in that shooting. And now, of all people, Sepp Blatter raising the prospect of whether the World Cup should be boycotted. Now, how credible is Sepp Blatter's voice in any of these matters? Because he was the FIFA president who was standing by Russia before he was eventually top of power in 2015, despite the fact Crimea had already been annexed by then. He never advocated boycotts in any way when he was FIFA president.
No, he was someone who always separated sport from politics. How legit, he's a real moral arbiter of our time, Sepp Blatter. No, I mean, look, he has history with the US anyway. He blames the United States for everything really that's befallen him. Those raids on the Borolac Hotel in 2015 and his own downfall. He is not a huge fan of the United States. He wasn't probably before that. And he's come out at an opportune moment to say this. That's not to say what's happened in Minnesota and in Minneapolis and other parts of America with the ICE agents haven't angered a lot of people around the world, haven't infuriated some of those people who happen to be football fans or who might have been thinking to go to the World Cup. But Sepp Blatter being the man to say this, yeah, maybe take that with a pinch of salt sometimes.
Yeah, I must admit, I wasn't rushing to file a story on what Sepp Blatter's views were, because I think they're sort of tainted anyway. He's very anti-Infantino. His successor blames him for a lot of the legal issues he's faced since he left office or was forced out of office. And also, yes, obviously the whole US issue is not something he's going to remember very fondly.
A lot of the coverage did not mention why Sepp Blatter might be motivated by some self-interest to suddenly come out with this opinion. He was endorsing comments by FIFA's former anti-corruption advisor, Mark Heat, who talked about his one piece of advice: avoid the United States for the World Cup. It was Gianni Infantino's FIFA that helped to expose some of the largesse of the Blatter era, some of those big bonuses, and has tried to distance itself from everything that Blatter really did and how he ran the place.
He did, and you can separate the two things, but as you said, as in terms of a messenger, yeah, perhaps there's probably others who are more likely to have a legitimate voice in this conversation, but there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole sort of debate and noise around, will teams go to the World Cup has sort of dissipated a bit. I think when after Trump rode back on his Greenland threats, I think that was a pretty major reason. I think that at that point it was looking like some European countries, if they'd followed through with the Greenland stuff, I think it probably would have led to some countries not going. That has been avoided, and I think that's the big one.
Yeah, but even on that, it wouldn't be the FAs that unilaterally decide to not go to the World Cup. If Greenland and something happened, this is like major international diplomatic. It'll be the governments of these countries that the FAs would be taking the lead from in almost all of the cases.
When was the last World Cup boycott?
1966 in England, when African teams refused to take part.
Very good. Excellent, Rob. Yes. I think there were 15 members of FIFA from African countries at the time. But FIFA would only give them half a place to play off against Asia. So there was only one place for all the countries in Africa and Asia, and they were not happy about it. And
quite right. I'd be furious.
Absolutely quite right. And also, I think they're pretty unhappy because they, at the time, FIFA, led by Stanley Rouse, were falling over backwards to try and include South Africa, but they made South Africa play with the Asian qualifiers because none of the African countries would play against them. Mad.
There you go. And while we're at these kind of questions of boycotts and football, just a reminder that Russia's ban from world and European football is largely driven by governments, again, in Europe, saying they wouldn't allow their countries to either travel to Russia or to host teams from Russia to play them. So like a force majeure situation. So when we are talking about World Cup boycotts, I think we've got to see the bigger picture here. And to be honest, if there was a European boycott of a North American World Cup, the last thing, or one of the smallest things we'll be thinking about at that point, is the World Cup, because the world is going to be right on the precipice if Europe and the United States have fallen out in a way that precipitates something like this.
Yeah, something grave would have had to have unfolded for a World Cup boycott to even be advanced by European governments, which would take everything beyond football and very much not be a priority at all. But concern about the conduct of US authorities, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, those ICE agents, and the deaths in the United States. The ICE agents will be at the Winter Olympics, which begin next week in Italy. They're going to be in Milan.
Yeah, this is kind of nuts, really, because they've announced it. They're going to Milan for the Winter Olympics to form part of the security for the US delegation, part of the protection of US dignitaries, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance, who are going to the opening ceremony. But, you know, ICE is like an immigration control enforcement body. I can never think of a time when they've been part of this type of operation. The Italians on the street certainly are furious about it. The mayor of Milan said he doesn't want them there. But the Italian government itself, again, and we've seen this with governments and the US, have to tread a very careful line here. The foreign minister saying it's not like they're going to be on the streets. And this quote, like I read in The Guardian, he said, you know, it's not like the SS are coming. But even saying stuff like this, it's so inflammatory. And that this is where the conversation is. Pretty strange times we're in.
Strange times. I mean, I've heard it. I don't know if this is true, that Donald Trump was told that there was going to be ice dancing at the Olympics, and he thought, "Hey, we're going another chance for a medal."
Just to be clear, all the security at Olympics more broadly is handled by domestic authorities. So in this case, the Italian authorities. Normally, all the bigger delegations will bring some sort of security to support their teams and offer some guidance to the domestic authorities here. So it's not going to be like American troops and American ICE agents are going to be, you know, on the streets of Milan, Cortina or Livigno.
No, but it's normal, like the normal Secret Service who would
the
accompany
FBI
accompany the Secretary of State or the Vice President or whatever.
Yeah.
But yes, why? But why are they sending ICE when they're so controversial?
And why put it on social media to like promote yourself going as well? A lot of it feels performative. It's super strange.
Well, one thing that won't be happening during the Olympics is any football at the San Siro, because the Inter and AC Milan stadium is being used for the opening ceremony. Also, the way things panned out in the Champions League, there can't be an Inter Milan Champions League playoff that needs to be played during the Olympics either. Now we've reached the end of the league phase, the second league phase in the 36-team Swiss format. And, well, what a dramatic end to it all.
Yeah, I thought it was actually a really great last night of action, and I was sort of glued to lots of it, and switching between matches. Much better than the end of the group phase in the first season, where things had effectively just about being decided already. This was much more at stake, things changing up to the very last minute. And obviously, you mentioned before, Rob, 5 of the 6 English teams qualifying automatically by getting into the top 8. And some people saying this is a sort of embarrassing for UEFA, but is it? I'm not quite sure. I can't quite decide.
Maybe not embarrassing is the wrong word here. It just shows the job that needs to be done to ensure there's competitive balance in European football. Why are people saying that? Because of the English dominance of capital in football, the amount of money pouring into Premier League teams, their ability to essentially buy a lot of the best talent in world football, being brought to bear here in a league format like this really tells you how strong the Premier League is compared to the old group stage format as well. And I want to ask, Zeke said it was very exciting. It was. The Benfica goalkeeper in the 97th minute scoring a goal to win 4-2 for Mourinho's team against his former team, Real Madrid, is great TV. It's great drama. You can't script this stuff. But there was a lot of football played till that last day. Does anyone remember any of it up until that last day?
Well, but the last day had its coming of age moment for the Swiss system. The fact that Benfica goal not only sent them through, but it suddenly knocked Marseille out on goal difference in one moment of change in injury time. But yeah, all the football that you require up to that point to get the drama, you've got to go through 8 match days for the big moment where you've got 18 games simultaneously and you're seeing how things are moving around. Yeah, is it too much football until then to get the exciting climax?
Yeah, in terms of Marseille being knocked out as well, if you can't come in the top 24, you're probably not that good anyway, right? So if you come 24th, great for you and your supporters. The other stat that's interesting is in terms of the 10 richest teams, I think 8 of them are in the top 10. Barcelona and Bayern Munich also qualified with those Premier League teams. It was good to see Sporting Club de Lisbon in there as well.
Sorry. There's €2.5 billion of UEFA prize money, and it looks like English clubs will bank more than €500 million of that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the whole thing about getting the Champions League. It makes such a huge difference to those club finances. I think there are too many group matches, but they've been forced into this position because the clubs want it because they want the money and they are getting better games generally. I think it's a better format than the old one, but the good thing about the Swiss model is you can actually change it if you want. So you could actually only have 6 matches, and you could still
10,
have the same
or 12,
system.
or 14.
Exactly,
Concertina,
yeah.
this thing. It's like, so the clubs you're saying have got the game like hostage here. Like there's no other option. But football and looking after the game, the health of the game, is that not part of the conversation here? There's got to be ways of tweaking this. One of the suggestions, which isn't a bad one, and some people at UEFA talked about, was maybe splitting these 36 table is very big into 2 groups of 18. Then you can follow the thing a little bit clearer as well, maybe. But there's got to be some tweaks to this. It's fair to say, even though that last day was exciting.
I'm sure Real Madrid would be complaining. They didn't make it into the top 8 to qualify automatically, so they got the playoff. But they're one of the clubs who are responsible for all this. They were pushing for a Champions League where you play the big teams more often. Obviously, they were instigated the Super League. They wanted a format, as we've got, where you've got at least 2 matches in the league phase against a similarly elite club, but they couldn't manage to finish in the top 8.
You've only got yourself to blame, Florentino. But this is an issue of competitive balance, is an issue, really, that's affecting football outside of Europe as well. We're seeing this where money's brought to bear on continental competitions in Asia, in Latin America in particular. Libertadores, for example, feels like a completely Brazilian affair now, with Brazilian teams typically facing each other in the final now. We saw 4 Brazilian teams, I think, at the Club World Cup as a result of all of this. It's almost compounding. This problem compounds things even further in concentration. In Asia, guess where the richest teams are?
Could they be in Saudi Arabia?
Martyn. Yes. And guess where, from the quarterfinals on, the Asian Champions League takes place exclusively?
Kuwait.
You guys.
Bangladesh.
It's the final 8, isn't it, in Saudi Arabia every year?
It is in Saudi Arabia. Some deal, I think it was for 5 editions in a row.
Well, hours before the final night of the Men's Champions League phase, the launch of the new FIFA competition, the Champions Cup, being played at Brentford, the semi-finals. Brand new FIFA competition. I made it down there, met some pod listeners as well beforehand. They were there at Brentford. One thing that struck me, obviously it's a new competition, it was being played during the day, low crowds. There wasn't really much done to promote this Champions Cup, and it's a challenge that we see so often. It's not just a women's football issue. We see it in other sports, men's and women's rugby as well. They speak to themselves, whereas they need to actually expand their audience and try to speak beyond. But I don't think there's much promotion beyond the women's football world.
Well, they could have tried the dynamic pricing, of course, and then we could have had another talk about tickets there. But this felt all a bit last minute, and also it was on the same day as that big Champions League night we've been talking about all over Europe.
Yeah, it was definitely a timing problem. I mean, I think there was a feeling, because we talked last week about this, Michelle Kang's multi-club ownership group, Kaniska sponsoring the competition, which was a conflict of interest issue as far as I was concerned anyway. I mean, I think they kind of, speaking to people close to them, they felt they were sort of doing FIFA and women's football a favour by trying to get some sort of coverage and promotion of this event, because they felt there'd been so little and ticket sales had been tiny. And they were just trying to basically do their best to help out. And I think they felt a bit miffed when I started questioning the FIFA's motives in agreeing this deal with them.
These new FIFA tournaments are often about learning the lessons, as we saw the Men's Club World Cup in the summer, is about how you expand your audience. And that's promoting beyond the women's football world, really trying to hit those general audiences. Maybe people who wouldn't usually go to a match, but you've got a FIFA tournament in town, so it might be your opportunity. You might never go to a World Cup, or you're going to have to wait 9 years until the World Cup's in the UK.
Yeah, from an organisation point of view, this is kind of crazy, because that very same night at the Emirates Stadium, the Arsenal men's team are playing. They played, was it Kairat? Yeah, in the Champions League in the last game of the season. I think there's a bit of crossover probably between the people who attend the Emirates for both of those teams. Yeah, really strange. What I'd like to see is someone actually give us a blueprint for what the future of women's football looks like. Because at the moment, these events that are being broadcast or announced by FIFA, they seem to just be exactly the same as the men's competitions. Now, is that what women's football needs? I'm sure brighter minds than ours who think about this a lot might have something different to say. It just seems a little bit lazy.
The fact that the women's game is replicating the men's game, which you do hear some of FIFA saying that the women's game needs to go out on its own path. The Champions Cup is the women's version of the Intercontinental Cup, which is just the continental champions. There will be a Women's Club World Cup starting in 2028, following on from the big men's launch that took place last year. This is what FIFA spends some of its money on when they say the money goes back into football. It's on these loss-making events, which they would say about trying to grow the game. And you've got to start from somewhere. It's just big marketing departments probably could do more to promote the events. So fortunately, it's not just what we've got to say. We're getting some listener and viewer feedback now, particularly from YouTube. You can follow us at Sport Unlocked on YouTube. If you subscribe, you'll get some of these clips. Hopefully you still listen to the entire pod. Jordan wrote, can anyone remember the last time any governing body of football, FIFA, the FA, PGMOL, etc., made a decision that made you think, yeah, that one's for the fans, players? Every decision is putting the most important stakeholders last to see how much profit can be squeezed out of them. And as always, they're too greedy and clueless to realise when they're driving towards a cliff edge. It's a unique kind of malevolent stupidity driven by selfishness.
Don't hold back, Jordan.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think now. Can you remember the last time?
Yes. I can. I can. Just because I like the campaign slow. 20's plenty.
Yes.
Did that happen though? We're away tickets capped at
£20. Well, 30. Well, £30. I think they were capped.
It doesn't rhyme with plenty.
No, 30's dirty.
I can think of a decision when FIFA finally did allow announcements of VAR decisions in stadiums, because when it was first introduced, particularly at the 2018 World Cup, you were left not knowing while long delays were going on what the decision was, how it was being playing out. Now, of course, the referees are allowed to announce them in stadiums. We are getting some decisions explained later on by refs.
We are, and the problem is we won't have enough time to discuss the other side of the ledger, would we? So we've done our best. There's a couple of examples. But the other
The
side
FA?
of it, a bit heavier.
The FA, scrapping replays, that helps players at the top end. Maybe not the lower end for those lower league clubs, players who want replays in the FA Cup. And you could say, when they make a decision, that one's for the fans or the players. Well, again, look in England at the FA. Well, they did launch the Women's Super League in, 2011. That required a lot of cash being put into it.
I think that probably, just thinking a bit more broadly, that accusation can be made against all the major sports governing bodies: rugby, football, cricket, tennis, everything, basically. Because, and I think you'd struggle to find a similar decision. You think that's just for the fans or for the players?
Well, particularly some fans in cricket, domestic in England, might question sort of the focus on the 100 at the expense of county cricket, the more traditional forms of the game. Let's go to some other comments. One on YouTube also said to us, FIFA's turned into a political entity instead of a soccer body, something that we have discussed quite often around the Peace Prize and some of the political relationships and dynamics.
Yeah, well, you could see why someone would think that.
But we do always welcome your feedback. You can message us at Sport Unlocked on all the social platforms, but it seems actually being on YouTube is the place where there's a lot of debate and people are messaging us, and on TikTok as well. Quite a few talking about the comments from Patrice Motsepe, the CAF president, on the eve of the final of the Africa Cup of Nations, talking about African football not being respected enough. We have now had the sanctions in from the Senegal-Morocco final. Almost $1 million in fines between them, but some of the bans are more notable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the ban for the Senegal coach, I think he got 5-match ban, not unexpected. Some of the players, I was quite pleased that CAF have done this, so that they've actually punished a couple of the Morocco players and the Morocco Federation for their behaviour with the ball boys, like grabbing the goalkeeper's towel to stop him like drying his hands and basically behaving really, really badly. And I'm very glad that they've been dealt with, and some of those players have been banned and the federation fined.
And of course, these bans, of course, are only for African competition that CAF is responsible for, because of course Morocco and Senegal have qualified for the World Cup this summer. So the Senegal coach Pape Thor will be on the sidelines. There's no chance of him missing any of that, despite him leading his team down the tunnel in injury time after the penalty was awarded.
Yeah, very swift action we've seen often. Football bodies do take a long time to come to any sort of conclusion. And yeah, looking now at our YouTube account at Sport Unlocked, almost 100,000 people have watched the video on there of Patrice Motsepe. A lot of them having a go at
Martyn Ziegler.
No, I should have said. Yeah. So, sorry. A lot quite critical of Motsepe. Some calling CAF an embarrassment, talking about unacceptable acts by the host nation, and others saying, CAF not capable of running football. Yet he was, though. Others saying, are Europeans running CAF? Talking about that scheduling, about it going to every 4 years, not every 2 years. But actually, quite a few quite glad that Motsepe stood up for Africa, saying that believing there's more respect from Europe than from within Africa from the media. But we do welcome all that feedback. Lots of people to get in touch.
The more the better, and looking forward to seeing what the next pod generates.
But for now, thank you for listening and watching. Goodbye for now.